Hi, Mike Caldwell here, and welcome to Realities and Practices of Off the Grid Living. Just want to give you a really quick background of myself. I'm a retired firefighter and paramedic, so when I bought the ARC 13 years ago, all it was an abandoned sawmill in the middle of a forest. Okay, there was no hydro lines coming in, there was no phone lines coming in. It was just a 30-foot wide by 100-foot long, two-story sawmill. There was a roof on the place and like 2.5 walls. The north side was finished, and the front side was about half finished, and the south side was maybe about a third finished, and the back side was completely wide open. But anyway, I didn't have any experience at all with anything construction related or electrically related, anything like that. So I was a complete noob. And 13 years ago, there was definitely off-the-grid homes out there, but it really wasn't as prevalent as it is today. There certainly weren't all the different subsidies and the encouragement to produce your own power like there is now. So when I was looking for outside assistance, there really wasn't any at all. So I had to learn pretty much everything by trial and error. And that's why I created this course. I'm going to share with you all of my mistakes and everything I learned. So what I'm hoping is going to happen is that you can learn from all of my mistakes, then you won't have to make them yourself. And when you go to create your own off-the-grid home, it'll be 100 or 1,000 times easier than the process I had to go through. Now, in this course, I'm going to be talking about what I did here. Okay, so this is a 6,000 square foot home. We've got 3 horses. We've got 7 alpacas. We have hundreds of people coming up here on the weekends. So we have a pretty elaborate and high end, well, not high end, but a pretty elaborate system here. Now, I know not all of you are going to want to build anything that big, but what's cool about this is by me going as big as possible, what you're going to learn is that you can downsize and you'll be able to size your system for what you need. Okay, if I only went to in size a small place, it'd be a lot harder for somebody to build a big place. But here I am, I've got the big place. It's a lot easier for you to figure out how to go small from there. All right, so let's get this course going, and we'll see what we can learn. So the objectives of this course are to learn the practices and the reality of off-the-grid living. Okay. Now, what my wife and I have tried to do, we've tried to live as normal a life as possible, but there have been considerations that we do have to make. So we're not a couple of hermits that have to boil our bath water on the stove or anything like that. We live a pretty normal life, and that's what this whole program is about: is how to live a normal life being off the grid. And what I also want to accomplish in this course, I want you to develop the critical thinking skills to best develop and conserve power. Okay. So I don't want you to follow what I did as a blueprint. Okay. I don't want you to do exactly what I did, because your setup is going to be different than mine. Right. So the whole point of this course is to give you the critical thinking skills to say, okay, Mike's got a solar array this big, but because I live in an area that's more south, we get more sun, I don't need an array that much. Or, since solar powers I can get them really cheap, I'm gonna install a great big huge solar array system, and that means my battery doesn't need to be as big. Okay, but you're gonna learn all these critical thinking skills so that you can develop your own system. Okay. Now, this is what I purchased. Okay. And actually, to be honest, it didn't look quite as good as this when I first bought it, because there's some roughed in framing done here. This roughed in framing wasn't there when I first bought the place. I did this before I moved in. But so in the top left corner, actually I can get a little highlighter here. Let's do that. No, not that. I want laser pointer. Okay, so this here, this is me moving in. There's a couple buddies. All of my worldly possessions are in this truck here, and we're moving in. And so I guess probably about 4 months later, we got robbed. Everything was stolen. And it's really no wonder, eh? When you don't have any back walls to your house, you don't have any front walls to your house. Anyway, this is what we bought when we moved in. Here, looking at the back, you can see how there's no siding on the top floor. Pretty much from this is a guest bedroom, this is my office, and these two are our bedroom now. And then all downstairs was wide open. This area here, this structure here with all the plastic hanging from it, like I said, this was a sawmill, so this was all wide open before I moved in. And what he would do is he would drive the logs in through this opening here, mill them out through the mill there, and then bring them back around and put them in this structure here, which was at one time completely enclosed in plastic. And this was his kiln. That's where he dried all of his wood. Okay. Here's what things look like downstairs when I moved in. You can see it's just a sand floor. The sawmill, I think, is gone now, but there was a sawmill back in this corner here. And like I say, where all this bright light is coming in, that's the sun coming through. So he'd drive the logs in through here, and then mill it up through here, and then go around through the back to the kiln. And here we are upstairs. This is what the upstairs looked like when I bought the place. It was roughed in, and there was a little bit of wiring. He'd started to wire the front room, but none of the back room's been wired. So this is what it looked like when I first moved in. And here's the Ark today. We are now a 6,000 square foot home and conference center. So we host about 10 to 12 weddings per year. We do corporate team building. We have 2 really big trail races here in the summer, and we have 4 snowshoe races in the winter. And then we host a number of outdoor education youth programs, both for high schools and community centers. And we've had different youth hockey teams come up, and soccer teams, and scout camps and cadets and that sort of thing. We're also a hobby farm. We've got 2.5 horses. I say 2.5 because we've got the full-size quarter horse, Xena, the full-size paint horse, Diaz, and then we've got a miniature horse who's a whole lot of fun, and her name is Nellie. And then we also have 7 alpacas. And the reason this is important because they all need water, okay? And so when you live in a farm in Canada, one of the problems is trying to get water to your animals throughout the winter when clearly your water will freeze. So I'm going to talk about how we managed to make all that happen. So here are some of the amenities we have at the Ark, and I showed you this in one of the introduction videos. But we've got a 52-inch high definition LED television with complete surround sound stereo system. We've got 2 full-sized electric fridges. Okay, we've got one upstairs for our personal use, and then we've got one downstairs for the bar to use during the weddings. We have a dishwasher. We have a washing machine. We have a dryer. We have the whole dance hall audio system. Okay, so we really get the music cranking with the disco ball going and on the strobe lights. And we even have another TV down there because sometimes our wedding guests like to put a slideshow on the television. And then because I've built this place myself, I needed a lot of power tools. Okay, so we've got a lot of power tools here. I've got a table saw. I've got circular saws. I've got a miter saw. I've got a thickness planer. So I've got a lot of tools that require, I've got a compression gun. And then there's, of course, the lights. We need to heat this place, and we need water. And over here, you'll see a swimming pool. We actually had, I think this was an 18-foot in diameter above ground swimming pool. We actually had that running for 3 years. And you know, the first year when I stayed on top of things, it worked great. And then the second year I got a little bit lazier, and I had to do a couple of shocks. And then the third year I didn't stay on top of it at all. It just got to be way too much work, and so I wasn't using it enough. And so anyway, I took it down, and yeah, so the pool's not here anymore. But we did have a pool here, and we were able to maintain it with an off-grid system. But it just took a little bit of work, and I'll talk about how I made that happen during the presentation as well. Okay, so watt powers the Ark. So you see what I did there with the watt? Yeah, that's pretty funny. But anyway, we've got a 1,200 amp hour 24-volt battery bank. And don't get hung up on these numbers and the units. We're going to talk about them very shortly. They're on that battery bank is on the other side of that wall. So there's a couple of cables that come down through here, and they go through the wall into a box, which I'll show you in the next slide for the batteries. We've got a 2 kilowatt inverter right here. And that is also a 55 amp charger. So not only does it provide 2 kilowatts of power to the house, it also is responsible for charging the batteries at 55 amps. It's not on this list, but this down here is a 3,000 watt inverter that I added just recently, and I took that out of an ambulance, and I'll explain later why I have 2 inverters. Okay, I've got 3,000 watts of photovoltaic solar panels up on the roof. So that's what these 2 lines here are going up to the roof. And then down here, there's a couple of lines going through here, and they go up to the hay shelter. I've got an 80 amp charge controller. That's what this unit is here. And it controls the solar panels that are on the roof of the hay shelter. I've got a 50 amp charge controller, which is right here, and it controls the power coming in from the solar panels on the roof of the Ark. And then I have a 25 amp battery charger. And if you saw the introduction, you'll see that this is a $260 little unit that I bought that saves me hundreds of dollars per year. Okay, and I'll talk about that as well. And then when it's not sunny, we need to charge the batteries, and that we live in Canada. So in the winter here, like in a dark winter day, you know, around winter solstice, December 21st, we're only looking at like a 4 to 5 hour window of sun. And if it's cloudy, then there's no power coming in at all. So we also have a 6 kilowatt diesel generator that we use to power the batteries when it's not sunny out. Like I said before, off the grid homes, they're not powered by the sun. Okay, they're not powered by the sun. They're not powered by the wind. They're powered by batteries. Okay, and it's how the batteries are charged that determine, you know, what you might want to call the home. So we produce about 70 to 80% of our power through the sun, and then the other 20 to 30% we get through the diesel generator. Okay, so let's look at each element of our system piece by piece. So here's our battery bank, and what this is you could either be one 24 volt battery bank, or it could be 4 6 volt battery banks, or it could be 12 2-volt battery banks. So you'll see that here's 2 volts, 2 volts, 2 volts to give you 6, another 2, 2, 2, 12, and another 12 here for 24. Okay, and there's those 2 cables that go back over to the DC disconnect. Okay, so this is a 1200 amp hour battery bank, and again, we're going to be talking about what an amp hour means a little bit later. It's 24 volts, and this unit weighs about 2,000 pounds. It is heavy. Okay, there's a lot of lead in those batteries. And we'll talk about. Well, actually, we're looking at the batteries now, so we'll talk about them right now. The batteries generally are charged with the sun, and so power is always flowing through. But every once in a while, we need to do something that's called an equalization process. And just over time, scale will build up on the elements inside the battery, and that'll decrease the amount of power that your battery has available. So every few weeks to a month, what I do is I supercharge the battery. I just pour a whole bunch of juice into the batteries, hopefully on a sunny day, and I can use the sun to do it, or I can also do it with the generator. And what that does, it just breaks up all those scaly buildups on the cells, and it brings the batteries, you know, not back to new, but it makes them newer. I've had these batteries. These are my original batteries. I've had them for 11 years now, and they're still going strong. One thing about batteries, though, is they can't put out as much power when they're cold, and unfortunately, these batteries are stored downstairs in a 2,000 square foot area with a big concrete floor. So that room, it gets to be about 6 degrees Celsius, maybe even down to 4 degrees Celsius. So it can be a bit cold down there, and so in the winter, the batteries struggle a little bit more, especially as they're getting older. But like I say, I've been going for 11 years now, and the batteries are doing great. They don't seem to be showing too many signs of slowing down. So here's the inverter. And what this does is, over here on the right, we've got the DC disconnect. And so this box here is full of direct current power. But our house doesn't run on direct current. Your house doesn't run on direct current. It runs on alternating current. Batteries are direct current, and homes run on alternating current. So what we need to do is we need to turn that 24 volts of direct current into 120 volts of alternating current. And that's what this unit does here. Okay? So like I say in the thing, it converts the direct current to alternating current. And then it also is responsible for charging the batteries. And since my diesel generator creates alternating current, then it actually has to turn it into direct current to go back in this direction to charge the batteries. And it's this unit here that controls how the batteries are maintained. So I just was talking about the equalization process. So it's this brainy unit here that decides how much power needs to go in to equalize the unit. And that equalization, that's what I was talking about with putting a lot of power into the batteries to dissolve all those buildups on the cells. Okay, and this unit here has a 2,000 watt capacity or 2 kilowatt capacity. Now, keep in mind that this is one of Outback's first units. And again, so I've had it for 11 years, and it's been running great. I've never had any issues with it at all. But nowadays, the same thing has happened with the solar stuff that's happened with all appliances. Remember, like 10, 11 years ago, I remember we bought a 32-inch TV. It was like $1,200 for a Panasonic 32-inch television. It was one of the bigger TVs out there, and it was pretty expensive. Now they make 55-inch, they make 60-inch TVs. So now what we paid 10 years ago for a 32-inch TV, now we can get a 55-inch TV for the same price, right? Like 10 years ago, 32-inch TV was $1,000. Today, a 55-inch TV is $1,000. So the things stay the same price, they just give you more value for what you're paying. And that's the same thing that's happened with these inverters here. So you can't even buy a 2 kilowatt inverter anymore. Now you might be able to get a 2.5 kilowatt, but I think most of them now are 3 kilowatts and 3 to 5 kilowatts. So you'll pay the same price that I paid, and we'll talk about prices later. You'll pay the same prices I paid, but you'll be getting more value for your money. So here's my first bank of solar panels. Now, this is what we use to collect the power from the sun. So my house is south facing. So this wall is facing south. That way there is south. And what I have is I have 10 24 volt 150 watt panels. They're rated for 150 watts, but they actually produce closer to 120. I built my own mounting system for that because the pre-made mounting systems are just really expensive. Nowadays, the mounting systems cost more than the panels do themselves. So it's okay to build your own mounting system, but just make sure you understand that you're assuming some risk with that, okay? Having a wooden mounting system isn't nearly as good as having an aluminum or a steel mounting system, okay? It's not going to be as strong. So if you build something out of wood and it breaks or it blows over or whatever, then you know that you have to take responsibility for it. What I did when I built my system, I don't know if you can see down here, but I put hinges on each of the legs, okay? So right now the panels are up in the air and they're at about a 60-degree angle, okay? It doesn't look that much because you're looking at the 25% slope I have on the roof. So the roof is already sloping and then this is sloping. So it's about a 60-degree, if you look at it this way, like this is a right angle here. So if you look at it this way, it's about a 60-degree angle going south. And you'll see here in the background, there's no leaves on the trees. That's because it's either fall going into winter when I took this picture or spring going into summer when I took this picture. All right. So in the late fall, winter, and early spring, the sun is low in the horizon, and you want the solar to be coming in as close to a right angle as you can. So the reason I built these on hinges is in the summer what I could do is I would need like 2 or 3 or 4 friends, and we would disconnect the mounts back here on these legs. We would push the panels forward ever so slightly, and then we would lower the entire panel system down to the roof, and then the panels would lay flat on the roof, and that would be a 22-degree angle. And like I say, so now the sun would be coming straight down in the summer. But what I've done is I've added more panels to my system now. This is what I lived on for the first 8 or 9 years, just these panels alone. And then last year, the year before, I added another 180 watts of power, another 1,800 watts of power to my system. And so what that means is that in the summer, when the days are so long and there's so much sun, my batteries are charged by noon or maybe 2 o'clock at the latest on the sunny days. So it really doesn't matter because I have so many panels now. It doesn't matter what orientation they have at that time of year. And so what I've done now is I just leave all of my panels up year round at 60 degrees. So I know they're not as efficient as they could be in the summer, but they're efficient enough to charge my batteries. And they're as efficient as they can be for the winter months when I really need the most power. So I could lower them and raise them, lower them, raise them, but it's a lot of work. I need friends to come over. This roof is really slippery. And so now I've just got enough panels that I can keep them at the 60-degree angle. and I don't have to worry about lowering them for the summer. But I just want to reiterate again, if you do build your own mounting system, make sure it is bomb proof, because like the winds are going to come through here, and you want to make sure those panels don't end up blown all over your backyard. Okay, so the solar panels, they're just not plugged into your batteries, okay? They have to go through what's called a charge controller. And what I have two maximum power point tracking charge controllers. And I don't understand exactly how this works, but it's pretty cool. Somehow what it does is it maximizes the power coming in from the solar panels. So the solar panels might show that 40 amps of power are hitting my solar panels, but somehow that 40 amps is turned into like 44 amps going into the battery bank. And again, I don't know exactly the science or the voodoo that makes that happen, but I don't need to. I just have to accept that it works that way, and it's pretty cool because, like I say, 40 amps can be hitting my panels, but 44 amps will be going into the batteries, which is really nice to get that extra 10%. And that's what MPPT controllers do. They give you about another 10% of power going into your batteries. Okay, so that's what I say here when I say the sun optimizes the sun hitting the panels for the DC power entering the batteries. And also, there is also a safety mechanism to ensure that the batteries are not overcharged. Like I said, in the summer here, on a sunny day, I can charge the batteries fully by noon. So if I've got 50 amps of power coming in here and 80 amps of power coming in for this charge controller here, that's 130 amps. And even when you're equalizing, when batteries are charged, you don't want to be dumping that much power into the batteries because that will damage the battery. So what these charge controllers do is they just make sure that not too much power goes into the batteries when you're charging. So, and I'm going to talk about how batteries are charged later, so that'll make more sense to you in a few minutes. Now, this charge controller here, again, it's when I bought everything else, it's about 11 years old, and it's a 24-volt charge controller. I could have set it for 12 volts or 24 volts, but the newer models, the one I bought a year or two ago, it can handle up to 48 volts. And that's really important because I'll talk about that right now. The reason the houses use alternating current as opposed to direct current is alternating current travels down wires very efficiently. Direct current doesn't. So the thing is with direct current, you need a lot thicker gauge copper wire or aluminum wire to bring the power to its destination. So the more amperage you have, and like I say, just bear with me because I'm going to be talking about amperage and voltage and watts in a few minutes. But the more amperage you have, the bigger the diameter of cable you need. So amperage and voltage are multiplied together to give you wattage. So if you can create something at a higher voltage, that means you need less amperage, okay? And like I say, I think you might be a little bit overwhelmed right now, but it's okay. We're going to go over all of this, so don't worry. By the end of this course, you'll have a perfect handle of this. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That's what's so cool about doing this course online as opposed to live, because you can go through this course now, check it all out, just immerse yourself in it. You're going to come through the other end understanding, maybe 50 or 60% of it. Then you can go through and watch the course again. And then that time you'll be able to absorb it all. Then you'll have a complete 100% understanding of everything I'm talking about. So anyway, my home is on 24 volts of power, as I showed you with the original batteries. But my solar panels that are on the roof of the hay shelter, I've wired them to produce 48 volts. So that means that less amperage is traveling down the wire to this charge controller. So I was able to use a smaller gauge of wire because the voltage is higher. Okay? Hopefully that makes perfect sense to you. And you know what? After you've watched the whole video, wait until you watch the whole video. But after you watch the whole video, if you have any questions, that's what the Facebook page is for, to help you out. So here's the DC disconnect, and this is the interface between pretty much everything. Everything comes and goes through this DC disconnect. So over here we have the inverter. So that's the DC from here, coming through here, getting turned into alternating current, going to the house. This is the the generator AC power comes through the inverter, goes through the DC disconnect, down through these two wires into the battery bank. Here's the one charge controller here that, again, sends DC information into the DC disconnect down into the batteries. Here's the other charge controller here. Okay, so the DC disconnect, it's just the central hub for everything. And because we have DC power in this box, we could also run different appliances with that use DC. Okay, so that's what these little punch outs here are for, and these breaker boxes. I could fill these breaker boxes full of circuit breakers, and we could run DC power right out of here. So two things that are often used on DC are, one, there's DC lighting, and there's also DC well pumps. And I started with the DC well pump, and I went away from it, and I'm going to talk about that again in the later part of the course when we're talking about more of the appliances. And I also had the option of DC lighting, and again later in the course I'll explain why I decided against using DC lights. And I just want to make note here is that although I decided against DC lights for our application here, I'm not against DC lighting in off-grid homes. And like I say, it depends on the application, and I'll explain that later in the course as well. Okay, something that we don't have here at the ARC, but I want to talk about because you might use it at your place, is a wind turbine. Now, this is my wind turbine. I did have a wind turbine up here, and I ran it for a couple of years, but unfortunately, it did not work. Okay, what's cool about wind is it can be windy 24 hours a day, depending on where you live, right? It can be, but unless you live like in the high Arctic, then it can't be sunny 24 hours a day. So I thought wind was going to be a pretty cool addition to our place because it is quite often windy here at night, and it's also windy in the winter when we don't have a lot of sun. So I thought it was going to be a good addition to complement our solar power, especially because it's windier here in the winter than it is in the summer. So we'd have sun in the summer, we'd have wind in the winter, and everything would be good. But the problem is that with our terrain here, we live in the Gatineau Hills. And so although looking south from our place, we've got a pretty big window, there is a hill to the west. There's a really big hill right to our north that's not too far away. And then there's also a bit of a hill to the east. Now, this is one of the things I want to warn you about hiring the experts, okay? The whole point of this course is to give you the critical thinking skills so that you can ask the right questions and then question the wrong answers, okay? So again, I didn't have that knowledge when I started my program here, so I made some mistakes. And this is one of the first and biggest mistakes I made. I hired a guy who professed to be some sort of wind turbine expert. So I brought him here, I paid him to come here, and I wanted to assess my property. I wanted to ask him if a wind turbine would work. And so he came with his little anemometer machine, and he took a map of where the hills were on all this stuff. And then he went home, and he came back, and he told me that, like 60% of our prevailing winds from the west, and 10% were from the southwest, another 10% were from the northwest, another percentage was from the east. But what he said is that our predominant winds were from the west, southwest, and northwest. So he said the hill that's at the northeast of our property wouldn't be in the way, right? Think about it. If you look at a map, if you look at a compass, if you look at west, if there's a hill to the northeast and the wind's coming from the west, it's not in the way, right? So the wind's going to come by, hit the turbine, and then hit that hill that's at the northeast. So he said it would work just fine. So I said, okay, if you say it'll work, then that's great. And he was telling me how great the wind was in this area, and how it was going to produce way more power than I thought it would. And anyway, I was really excited about installing this thing. So he was supposed to come and help me put it up. And of course, he never showed. So I had to figure out how to put it up myself. And this is an 80-foot, pretty much freestanding tower. It just has all those cables coming down from it. So it's a pretty big job, and it's pretty heavy. And, it's always a little bit windy here. So that blade's turning when it's going up. And anyway, it was a pretty big deal to get that thing up there. And me and my buddy, we were able to figure it out and get it up on our own. But then it didn't work. Like, it worked in that it produced power, but it would be facing into the west. Those turbines would face in the west. They'd be purring along. I would run inside. I would look at the charge controller for the turbine, and all this power would be coming in. I'd be looking at it, then woo, all the power would disappear. And I'd go outside, I'd look, and the wind turbine would be facing north for some reason, even though, the wind was coming from the west. And then while I was watching, it would swing back into the west, and it would start purring again, start producing power. And then it would die down. It would be facing south. It was just all over the place. And what was happening is that the wind was coming from the west, like the guy said it would, but it was hitting that hill behind the wind turbine, and it was creating like a tornado, not a tornado, but it was creating like an eddy of wind. So wind was like spinning around in a circle within that little valley that hill in the northeast created. So I didn't have a clean wind, okay? And so before you put one of these up, make sure you have a clean wind. Make sure that there's no hills in the way. Make sure there's no big trees blocking anything anywhere. I'm not just talking about in front of where your wind comes from. In any direction, make sure it's a very clean wind and that there's no obstructions at all. So if you live in a big grassy field, that's great. If you live like on a river and the wind's always whipping up that river, then that's great. But if you live in a hilly area, then wind power might not be right for you. And so just to finish that story, what was pretty funny, it wasn't funny at the time when I called the guy, I'm like, dude, like, why'd you say the wind was good here? You're supposed to be an expert. And he said that he told me what I wanted to hear. He said that he knew that I only wanted to hear that a wind turbine could work there. And so he wasn't going to tell me any different. And that's just completely ridiculous. I wouldn't have paid the guy $200 to do something I'd planned to do anyway. But my point, the moral of the story here is just don't trust anybody. Always get an opinion. And if you have any doubts at all, get a second opinion. And again, that's what this Facebook page is for. If you have any questions at any point, post your question on Facebook. Hopefully I'll have the answer. If I don't have the answer, there might be another member on the site who's had a similar problem to you and has found a different solution that I might even know of. So anyway, just don't trust anybody. Only trust yourself. Don't trust yourself because you don't have all the information. Just ask questions and make sure you're completely confident in the answer before you move forward. All right? I hope that helps and doesn't scare you too much. Okay, so how do all of these items connect? All right, so let's start at the sun. Okay, so the sun comes from up here, up in the sky, and it comes and hits the solar panels. The solar panel interface creates 24 volts of power, or more, or less, however you've got it configured, and that power travels down the wires into DC disconnect, but it kind of goes through your charge controller first. So it goes through your charge controller and into the DC disconnect. Now, that power then from the DC disconnect travels through the DC disconnect and it goes into your batteries, okay? And that's where your energy is stored. On your batteries, you should have an amp hour meter, and that's like your fuel gauge. That tells you, that's like your fuel gauge, that's like your speedometer. That tells you how much power your batteries are storing, and it tells you how much power your batteries are using. You know what? Let's take a quick break right now and go downstairs, and I'll just film a quick little video, and I'll show you my amp hour meter. I'll show you what I'm talking about with the information that you need for controlling your system. Okay, let's just put this on pause here, and I'll be back. Okay, so here we are down here at my control panel, and here is the meter that I was talking about. It's a little dark in here, but let's see if we can see it okay. Oh, there we go, we can see that. Perfect. So what this is showing is, it's showing that the house is using, or points, whoa! See that? That was really cool. I'll explain what that was in a sec. So what that is showing how many amps are being drawn out of the battery bank right now. So if you notice that it was saying -7, and then it went up to -32, and then dropped right back down. See, I don't know if you could hear it, but I could hear it here. The furnace clicked on. Well, not the furnace, but the, oh, excuse me, I got a tickle. The oil boiler clicked on, and so any piece of machinery that clicks on it has an energy hammer, so it spikes in energy before it drops down to normal. You may have noticed that in your house sometimes, like when you're just sitting there and the lights flicker for a sec, that's because the fridge is clicked on. Well, same thing happened right there. So now that the oil boiler is running, the house is drawing 14 amps of power out of the batteries, okay? Oh, sorry, I've got this tickle. I don't want to refill this because that was so good the way the furnace clicked on and showed you that. All right? So right now the batteries are at minus 12.6 amp hours, okay? What that means is 12.6 amp hours of power have been drawn out of the batteries, okay? So if we look at that as a percentage, that's 99%, all right? Very little has been drawn out. We'll go back to that in a second. We'll see that it's going to say more than 12.6 since we're using 14 amps right now. So our voltage is 24.7 volts. My system is a 24 volt system, but a fully charged 24 volt system at rest, fully charged system, will read 25.3 or 25.4 volts. Okay, I don't know why that is. It just is. It's true for every system. Every 24 volt system that is fully charged will be about 25.4 volts. And as power is drawn away from the batteries, that causes the voltage to drop. And so that's why it's at 24.7, 24.8. I think if the furnace clicks or the boiler clicks off in the next few seconds, we'll see that that voltage will go up. All right, so while we're here, let's look up here, and we can see the charge controller. It's nearing the end of the day here now. I think it's close to 4 o'clock, which is late in the day at this time of the year for sun. So only 1.5 amps is coming in from the solar panels. Okay, so 1.5 amps is coming in from the solar panels, and we've got still the 14.4 going out. So what that is saying is that 1.5 amps is going into the batteries and 14.5 is going out. That means the house is actually using 16 amps of power right now. Okay, so let's see how many amp hours we're at. So remember we were at 12.6 amp hours used in the house. Now we're at minus 13 because, like I say, that oil boiler has been sucking energy out of my batteries, but we're still at 99%. Okay. Let me just tell you a very quick story. Oh, the boiler just shut off. So there's at 24.8, 24.9. So you'll see on the next, see how it's going up. It was 24.7, 24.8, but now it's 24.8 or 24.9. That's because the house is now only using 8 amps. Now, watch this. I've got lights on in this room right now. So when I turn these lights off, that's going to go from minus 8.2 to minus 7.2 because these light bulbs use 1 amp of power. Okay, ready? Here we go. Boom. See that? 7.2. So it's really cool. Once you get in tune with your house, you can come in, you can see what the house is, how much power is being used, and you could kind of have an intuitive sense of what's on in your house. So let's see if it's got up in voltage. Yeah, so now 24.8, 24.9. So it is, the voltage is up a little bit because there's less power being used. Let's turn those lights back on. I just want to tell you a really quick story. When I bought this system, the guy that I bought it from, he was a really good guy and he wanted to save me as much money as possible. So one of the ways he thought he could save me money was by not including this meter in the system. You're like, oh, it's a meter. Like, how much can that cost? You know, I don't remember, but I think it was like $600 or $700 for this little meter, which is crazy, but that's how much it costs. And so when he said, you know, you can get away with not having one of these, I was like, yeah, sure. If I can save $600, $700, let's do that. But the thing is, if you could save $600 or $700 on your car, if it didn't come with a speedometer or a fuel gauge, would you buy that car? I don't think so. You need to know how much gas is in the tank, and you need to know how fast you're going. It's the same with this here. You need to know how much power is in your batteries, and you need to know how fast that power is being either sucked out or drawn back in. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but remember there's a 1.3 amps coming in from the sun there. That's from the solar panel array that's on the roof of the house. And then over here we have the solar panel array that is on the hay shelter. And unfortunately, you can't really see that. It's a reflection or whatever. But that is showing that 1.8 amps is coming in. So we've got a total of 1.8 plus 1.3, so we've got 3.1 amps of power coming in from the sun at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a cloudy winter day. So that's not bad, but it's not good either. It just is nothing. All right. So that's it. The house is using 12.5 amps now. I don't know, something else clicked on in the house somewhere, but that's how it goes. So that's it. Let's get back to the presentation. All right.